welcome. I'm Ginny Hallam of Halborns, and you're listening to our 10 Minutes With sessions. Halborns are part of the brilliant Empowering People group who support with tech-enabled people solutions. And part of our support are these 10-minute with sessions. Over the last 2 months, we've been keeping a watchful eye on well-being, highlighting little discussed personal challenges that can have an impact on our colleagues and their teams, including separation, divorce, challenges for new parents, and much, much more. We know employee wellbeing is a complex picture that shifts with an individual's own lived experiences, and creating a culture capable of taking an holistic approach is key to supporting the needs of your people. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Rena Christou, Managing Director here at Halborns, to drill into key areas to be thinking about when supporting your people. Hi, Rena.
Hi, and thank you for that introduction.
So I've got 4 questions for you. We've only got 10 minutes, so shall we get cracking?
Yeah, let's go.
Fantastic. So what would you say the 5 top tools are for supporting mental health at work?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So in terms of supporting mental health, there are so many areas that you can tackle. So the first one that I think is really, really important is having clear policies around mental well-being so that individuals know exactly what support is available. So, for example, thinking about areas where individuals may struggle with their mental well-being and are more likely to call out for support. So that could be, you've mentioned a separation leave as an example. So where an individual is separating from, spouse or partner. There are lots of statistics around the fact that they are particularly likely to be struggling with their mental well-being. So signposting in that way. Other policies you might think about putting in place, aside of the obvious policies around promoting or championing mental well-being at work, might be a policy around menopause or around domestic abuse. So again, so that individuals that are struggling with their mental well-being linked to one of those issues in particular, or the condition that we talked about, can call out for support directly. Another area is promoting healthy habits, and healthy habits doesn't just fuel healthy bodies, but also healthy minds. So thinking about introducing, for example, email curfews. It might be introducing sleep coaches, so access to sleep coaches. It could just be access to an EAP, so an employee assistance program, where individuals can access the support that they need in real time when they need it. And we've seen all sorts of creative things as well. So even down to arranging for puppy cuddles and laughing classes. So lots of options there. But promoting healthy habits is really important to make sure that people are properly switching off, properly taking the annual leave that they need to throughout the year, so they're not saving it up for one occasion, for example, and getting that rest to recharge and refuel both bodies and minds. Training managers on how to approach a discussion would be my third one, around mental well-being. So, these are difficult conversations to have because, most you'd like to think that most people want to approach a conversation around mental well-being in a positive way, in a sensitive way. And actually, sometimes that fear of handling a conversation around mental well-being sensitively puts people off from having the conversation altogether, which has got to be the worst thing. So empowering your managers through training to understand how to approach those discussions, or how to respond to a discussion when an employee approaches them to say that they're struggling with their mental well-being, is a really good starter. And then finally, two more from me: signposting to support options that are available, because quite often we're not medically trained, we don't know how to respond fully, and we can give some initial guidance in terms of the support that's available, but actually signposting to professionals that can support. So that could be both within other organisations, so charities or medical professionals, but also even in terms of mental health champions and first aiders within the organisation, if you have those.
Fantastic. We could certainly all do with some help with healthy habits, couldn't we? And what are the key differences, so in terms of mental health first aiders and mental health champions? I think there is a difference, isn't there? So what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a mental health first aider is someone who administers mental health first aid much in the same way that you would have individuals trained for dealing with physical first aid. So they are individuals that are trained to provide that first aid support in respect of mental well-being and mental health issues. Now, if we talk about mental health champions, that's an entirely different role. So they're not necessarily trained in delivering that kind of first line medical support in the same way as a mental health first aider, but they are there to champion your mental well-being and your mental health strategy. So they're usually volunteers within your organisation, so employees who are there to support and promote your mental fitness initiatives that you might have in place, or your well-being strategy, and also to feed back to you on what colleagues may find useful. So they're kind of the conduit between you and your colleagues, your wider employee workforce, to provide you with that information. So you might have kind of a monthly meeting, for example, where they feed that information back to you, or quarterly, so that you understand what it is that people would find useful, or what it is that they're struggling with, that they're reporting back to your mental health champions. The one thing that I would say is set them up to succeed. So in the same way that you were kind of asking then, well, what is the difference? Making sure that you communicate exactly what their role is to your wider colleague workforce, because ultimately what we don't want to do is for individuals to think that they are, supposed to be therapists or psychiatrists, or that they're mental health first aiders, if that's not the case. Now, it could be that they wear both hats, but being really clear on what their purpose is and what their role is. So thinking about creating a role profile for them internally, or some sort of communication that you issue out to your colleagues to explain exactly what it is that they are there to do and to support you to achieve.
And also, I suppose, creating the time for them to do that role, because obviously everyone has busy jobs, busy responsibilities. So if you create that time, then it gives them the opportunity to support in the way that perhaps they've suggested they're interested. Yeah,
absolutely.
And what about the best approach in terms of a discussion around mental health with a colleague? So you identify a colleague that you think may be struggling with their mental health. How best do you approach that?
Yeah, so if you've spotted signs that make you think that actually there are differences in somebody's behaviour, the way that they're behaving emotionally, even their appearance, that make you think that they might be struggling with their mental health or mental well-being, the first thing to do is to think about where to have that conversation. So it's not just about saying the right things and getting that person to open up, but think about the setting that you're creating as well. So create a comfortable and confidential setting to have that conversation, which might be, even saying to somebody, let's go for a walk, or let's go to the coffee shop. If you're working from home or they're working from home, again, just making sure that you're checking with them that they genuinely are able to talk to you confidentially, because they might be worried that somebody else would overhear. And also from your own kind of personal working space, again, whether it's at home or in the office, making sure that you're not going to be interrupted or have distractions. So things like making sure your phone's switched off, that you're not doing it at a time where, looking at your diary, actually you've only got a 20-minute slot and then you're feeling rushed. So really creating an opportunity to get that person to open up by showing that you are there to actively listen. Once you've got that setting set up in the right way to have that conversation, the next thing is to think about how you frame the discussion that you want to have. So everybody, it's such a personal thing in terms of having that conversation, and not everybody will be comfortable to speak to you about their mental well-being and their mental health. So start off like you said, so saying, I've noticed. So talk to them about what you've noticed, where the changes are, and just wanted to check if everything was okay. How are you feeling at the moment? How long have you felt like this? Is there anything else I can do to help? And by that, when we're asking kind of how we can support somebody, the key thing that we should always remember is not to jump in with solutions. So I know sometimes it can be really easy to think, oh, okay, well, I've got a quick fix for you, why don't you do this? Well, actually, that sometimes can be unhelpful, because the person, there might be personal reasons that they don't want to share with you, or again, they might feel that you're trivializing what they're saying. So just being there to listen, but asking those questions to create that kind of open-ended questions so that they share as much as possible. And always remember to think about how you're going to keep that conversation going. So if you're on the receiving end of someone sharing with you that they're struggling with their mental well-being, the best thing that you can do is make sure that you've set up check points in terms of when you're going to kind of reach out to them again, so that they know that you don't just think that it's all been sorted because they've not come back to you, because it's probably taken a lot for somebody to open up in the first place. So, say, well, why don't we touch base again at the end of the week, or why don't we catch up again tomorrow, depending on the situation, but just making sure that you've got those various touch points to keep that discussion going. And there are effective tools that you can do on that front as well. The other thing that I would say is that there are really good tools for support. So, for example, to help you keep that conversation going and for it to feel more natural, you could put in place a wellbeing communication plan. So agreeing with that individual, when are we going to kind of next speak about this? What does that look like? How are we going to communicate? And again, that way, if the person becomes so unwell that they're signed off from work, again, you've got something in place that covers off that scenario and says, right, well, this is how we've agreed we're going to communicate on that basis. And there are a few other tools for support as well. So, you might think about, well, let's do a stress risk assessment. Let's put in place a wellbeing action plan. What are the areas that you're struggling with? Let's talk about where those, and it might not be that it's work related, it might be factors outside of work. But again, actually, even within the workplace, there are things that you can do to support people's home lives. It might be flexing their hours, it might be allowing them to work from home, it might be allowing them to communicate in a different way, so not having to be on video calls for a certain period of time. So there's lots that you can think about to support well-being issues even outside of work.
As you say, it's about starting the conversation in a sensitive and appropriate way, isn't it? Giving the individual the opportunity to kind of keep control of the conversation and to do things in their own time and at their own pace to a certain extent. And the key for managers is actually to start having the conversation in the first place, isn't it? I think so often we see as employment lawyers those situations where perhaps the start of the conversation has been a little delayed, and that can cause problems with issues that could perhaps have been dealt with or supported on much sooner and nipped in the bud, or created a supportive environment to help somebody flourish despite perhaps some of the challenges that they've been having.
Absolutely. And I think the one area we see that in particular is around performance issues. So quite often, there'll be concerns around somebody's performance. And actually, if we step back, if this person's got long-standing service and you've not had those issues before, the chances are that there is something else going on with that person's life that is impacting their performance. So having Absolutely. Those conversations, like you say, is a really good starter for 10.
And if the colleague is absent, how can you keep the conversation going?
Yeah, so it really depends on the circumstances around the absence. So if the absence is as a result of a formal performance management process or a formal disciplinary process, it might actually be in the individual's best interest to keep that conversation going even during their absence, to reassure them, for example, as part of the performance management process, the purpose of that process is, it's not about exiting somebody, but it's about supporting you, understanding how we can support you without you coming back to work. We can't put those plans in place to enable us to do that. With a disciplinary process, it might be that, actually we think that allowing them to continue to be absent from work might exacerbate their condition if they've gone off as a result of the formal process. So the key, I think, is even if somebody is absent from work, to continue to reach out from a welfare perspective, because unless you keep that conversation going, the longer that absence continues, the harder it is to then ignite the conversation and to get them back to work. And there are lots of statistics around that. So keeping that discussion going is really key. And again, as we've said, so a wellbeing communication plan can be a really good tool. Reaching out to ask for consent to obtain a medical report can be a really good tool. So there are lots of ways that you can keep the conversation going to show that you're looking for ways to support that person and to support their return to work.
Rena, that has genuinely been so interesting. Thank you so much for taking us through some of that insight. If someone's listening today who has really understood the value of proactively supporting mental health at work, which I'm sure there are many, how can they get in touch to chat through some of the supports and tools that you're able to help with?
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in talking through the support that's available, we can reach out to us by email. So if you email info@halborns.com, and that'll come straight through to us, and we can direct you to the different solutions for support.
Fantastic. And that's on the screen, obviously. So just email info@halborns.com and we'll immediately get back to you with queries. Many thanks. You've been amazing as usual. Hopefully we'll have lots of queries off the back of today, and no query is a silly one, is it? So please do get in touch, and I'm sure we'll be able to help with any challenges that you might have in terms of supporting colleagues with mental health within your workplace. Thank you so much, Rena.
Thank you.